thanks so much. I am deeply grateful for everybody being here today amongst these really weird times, and also to be selected amongst this group of incredible talks over this weekend. Thank you for putting this event together. Before we begin, though, I'd like to highlight a content warning that the discussion today will cover some pretty confronting material. If you feel like this is too intense given the circumstances, please feel free to drop out for the next 20 minutes or so. Before all of that, though, I hope you'll indulge me in a short video.
Buddy, tell it.
Laza, play. Hey, Laza. Hey, Asa.
Say Alexa.
Laza. Play Tigger Digger.
Whoa.
I can't find the song Shake It Took Her.
Say Alexa.
Alexa, play Digger Digger.
I can't find the song Too Good to Her.
Laza,
Alexa plays Street Shaw.
Let him do it.
Laza, play Digger Digger. Laza, play Digger Digger.
Oh. Bobby, can you tell it to play Wheels?
You
on
want
the
to
bus?
hear a station for porn detected. Porno ringtone, hot chick amateur girl calling
No,
sexy.
No.
Hot pussy anal dildo ringtone.
Alexa,
Android.
stop!
I'm fascinated by stuff like this. When the veneer of technology and design falls away, what we're left with is this exposed and often ugly guts of our collective decision-making, our biases, our shortcomings. This is an example of the paradox of the designed system. A cute Kodak moment destroyed when the interface facade falls away and a tiny robot explodes in a tirade of obscenities at a small, bewildered child while his father begs the device to stop. I love it. I love it because even though this moment is deeply absurd, it's also banal. Because the Alexa isn't actually malfunctioning. Yet if any one of us were to walk up to a kid and shout this stream of vulgarities in their face, we'd rightly go to jail. It's incredible as well that the father is unable to stop this device, relegated to this form of powerlessness in the moment. This clip is a perfect encapsulation of what we're trying to understand at the New Design Congress. In popular discourse, we often talk about living in the darkest timeline. It certainly seems like that now. And for the last few years, the New Design Congress has been learning about the interplay between the work of designers of all sorts and the world, and how it leads to these absurdities and beyond. Today, I want to take a moment to share some of these observations, extrapolate from this little clip to a wider set of systems.
Even though we feigned this whole line of like, there probably aren't any really bad unintended consequences, I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are. And I would encourage all of you, as the future leaders of the world, to really internalize how important this is. If you feed the beast, that beast will destroy you.
In 2017, at an event held by the Stanford Business School, former Facebook exec Chamath Palihapitiya made international headlines by expressing a seemingly rare and frank level of remorse at his role in building Facebook. His central belief is pretty stark, and through a mix of good intentions and feelings of trepidation, Facebook's unethical design now serves as this cauldron, this cause of disinformation, political polarization, and addiction. This is a marketing video put out by the Center for Humane Technology, and like Palihapitiya, they argued that app addiction, social isolation, outrage, misinformation, and political polarization are all traits of this unethical approach to designing interfaces and platforms. Using dark UX patterns and addictive design, the tech we use causes what Tristan Harris calls human downgrading, which reduces a person's potential to be their best. At scale, the Center of Humane Technology sees this kind of thing as a technologically driven existential crisis to humanity. And these arguments share a common theme, where the decisions made when designing a system or an interface can directly cause terrible outcomes. Let's look at 3 brief moments in time, each caused by technology. In this viral video, an infant is delighted by a smartphone, transfixed. But when its parents take the device, the child responds with this horrendous tantrum. I've spared your headphones from the sound, but trust me, it's absolutely blood-curdling. It's a complete meltdown. You can see how loud it is in the kid's face. And then, when the parent gives the phone back, the kid is totally fine. Back to normal. This is the tragedy of innocence, where the systems we have built can reprogram you, no matter your age, and cause you to develop dependency on the screen soon after you enter this world. This video shows the disturbingly filthy room of a teenage streamer. As she sits ignoring the camera person in the room with her, you can kind of infer how much time she spends online by the items around her desk and the neatness of it compared to the rest of her room. This is the tragedy of self, in which the systems we have designed are built to trigger addictive vanity and cause you to perform and curate yourself online. In this video, an older woman live streams herself for a small audience. She's a member of the right-wing QAnon conspiracy group, and she's telling her viewers about her new discovery, that McDonald's is grinding children into their food and selling them as Big Macs in restaurants across America. The people in her comments are shocked and cheering in this vicious feedback loop. This is the tragedy of truth, in which the systems we have built are designed to push disinformation and cause you to question the world in incoherent and conspiratorial ways. When Palihapitiya and Harris describe the unethical behaviors of technology builders, they are, of course, referring to outcomes like these and many more. They are members of a growing chorus of tech executives, design practitioners, academics, and journalists who see these instances as the result of forces that rip society apart, and the intervention can only be found through the introduction of design ethics, a promising core foundation to right this crisis. Today, I will argue that design ethics is in fact not the answer. Instead, this perspective suffers a serious misunderstanding of the role that design systems play in our lives. Worse still, design ethics is a form of reductionism that allows designers to escape the scrutiny of their work as it fails individuals and communities, and as we collectively grapple with the realities of broader social, technological, and political realities. Thanks to an Apple developer education scholarship, my first years as a designer were spent during the early app gold rush. But I personally struggled to reconcile my work with the constant international headlines of data breaches, surveillance, and interpersonal technology-enabled abuse. If we were to design technology for trust, I believed that encryption and privacy would be its solution. In 2014, I prototyped Signal, the secure messaging app, with OpenWhisper systems, and we worked diligently to design performance security and clear interfaces at a time when there simply were no other options. Soon afterwards, I led design at a secure cloud storage company name-dropped by Edward Snowden himself. We completed this collaboration between design and cryptography and developed new methods for social trust and online identity informed by commission research done with Carnegie Mellon University. But despite building secure and private solutions that sought to protect users, headlines of breaches and abuse continued, in spite of the availability not of the tools that I built, but also a growing marketplace. In 2017, I worked with the Berlin privacy NGO, Tactical Tech, hoping to understand why digital security projects hadn't completely succeeded. In my 2 years there, I came to define a concept I call weaponized design, where a system or an interface harms a user while performing exactly as designed. Unlike dark UX patterns, the unethical practice of employing cognitive tricks to influence people to act against their own interest, weaponized design is insidious and opaque. On the left, Facebook's year-in-review algorithm juxtaposes a dead child and a burning apartment against a festive end-of-year celebration. On the right, a messaging client betrays its college kid programming bias, where the term passed means only to pass an exam, not the death of a loved one. This interface then serves positive, congratulatory messages to devastating personal loss. Almost all popular frameworks that include design ethics consider it as practice-based, a responsibility of an individual or a team to assess their motivations over what they choose to build. The onus for better outcomes lies at the feet of anyone who touches a designed system, or an app, or a platform, or infrastructure, and they can respond with a variety of tools. If that's true, I'd like to explore two parts of this that I think are very common: consent and representation. Consent in technology is drawn from inclusive and progressive politics, setting a foundation to advocate for the empowered individual. As you can see here, iOS's privacy settings is an example of informed consent, this combination of frictionless design that empowers users through simple language and simple interactions. And I don't mean to single anyone out, but a good definition of consent comes from Building Consentful Tech, a zine by Una Lee and Dan Tolliver. Consent is described as freely given without duress and can be withdrawn any time. Cultivating consent means that the user must be completely informed and the process transparent. And consent is key for ethical data use policies and terms of service, where the user is given more power by the platform or provider. Consent as an ethical design methodology has even made it into the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation.
Millions of members of the aspiring middle class find themselves in a chicken or egg type dilemma. Even though they have steady income, they still can't access credit because they lack a formal credit history. And without credit, they can't build a formal history. Yet, most of these consumers carry a smartphone, are online, and connected through social networks, leaving behind a digital footprint that can be analyzed to better understand who they are and their attitudes toward credit. Lendo helps financial services providers extend credit to consumers in this segment by analyzing these digital footprints to verify their identities and assess risk. Their algorithms translate non-traditional data like social media activity, browsing behavior, geolocation, and other smartphone data into insights around the consumer's behavior, network, and strength of their relationships. Information that can be highly predictive of people's creditworthiness.
In 2017, the average smartphone user in Europe or North America had 80 apps, 80 installed on their devices, and each of these has its own important use cases, its own living terms of service, and most importantly, each interacting with a broader network of dozens, hundreds, or thousands of actors. Expecting a user to maintain an informed agreement with just one wholly unknowable system is impossible. Informed consent crumbles at scale and sits in direct conflict with a world saturated by platforms and stakeholders. I may have an agreement with Twitter, but how does this extend to algorithmic analysis of my creditworthiness now or in the future? Going further, withdrawing consent, even when seemingly informed, can also be deeply problematic. Disabling location services is withdrawing consent, but sharing your location with someone you trust while on a date is a key safety technique for vulnerable users. Location services also help users with mobility or accessibility difficulty navigate the world more easily. To opt out is to reduce your quality of life or threaten your physical safety. Design ethics often frames its criticism from a solutions-based representation perspective. A problematic behavior is observed, identified as caused by technology, and then a solution is sought to address it. The criticism of early facial recognition and biometric technology stands as perhaps one of the most troubling examples of this form of popular solutionism in the last decade. In this video from 2011, an HP computer with facial recognition technology ignores a black man's face, but follows his white colleagues. Early biometrics were loaded with this homogeneous data set, and as a result were either unable to detect or responded very inappropriately to non-white features. And the popular discourse rightfully seized upon the racism embedded in these technologies at the time.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go.
As a result, these technologies are more normalized and more resilient. And the pie-in-the-sky example is in Seattle, where shoppers can walk into an Amazon Go store with no cashiers and no payment terminal, quickly pick up the items they want and leave. This is this convenience facilitated by biometrics.
The World Food Programme current exploration of blockchain technology called Building Blocks is implemented in the Zaatari and Azraq refugee camps. We authorize the transactions using iris scanning or iris biometric technology. The iris scan actually triggers the private key of each beneficiary.
So we use that for cross-checking, but also other services like the WFP supermarket.
In this case, they could go to one of the supermarkets in the camps and redeem their entitlement.
You go and buy something when you need it at the time that is suitable.
هلا بروح مثلا بدي اشتري مثلا اغراض، بدي اتسوق بالمول يعني اغراضي كلها، بفوت عند الكاشير مثلا بدق اغراضي كلها على الكاشير على اسمه، بيقول لي اعطيني عينك بس طلع بالكاميرا، اطلع فيه يعني بعطيني يعني بعمل كبسه للعين او كذا، بصورها يعني للعين وبيقول لي هاي اغراضك.
They would scan their iris, that iris gets verified against the UNHCR database, and we get back a code for that person, and it's that code that triggers the private key on our system Building Blocks that allows the transaction to go through.
Using registration information to feed.
What starts as a criticism of the lack of inclusivity of a technology leads to two political worlds converging by the end of the decade, enabled but not caused by this technology. What's fascinating to me is that the user experience of these two worlds is almost identical. In both cases, it's just food distribution through the same kinds of methods and the same kinds of user flows, but in two very different contexts. The key difference between them is power, and it's not hard to imagine Amazon Go in these times becoming more and more like a distribution center for vulnerable people. When people are destabilized to such an extent, these two examples may become indistinguishable. But the maturation of facial recognition has a third, more insidious example. The world was captivated last year by ongoing protests in Hong Kong with this confronting imagery of anonymity in numbers against the total surveillance adversary. This is the true use case for biometrics. While we were busy arguing over representation, biometrics revealed itself to be a tool for facilitating power. Ethical and inclusive facial recognition criticism is a total failure. The only defense left to the people who are affected by it is to physically tear it from the earth. In 2018, researchers at the Association for Computer Machinery produced a study that showed that explicitly instructing computer scientists to consider the organization's code of ethics had no observed effect when compared to a control group. That design ethics is so widely championed means that we must urgently confront the reality that design ethics and its tools are also deeply flawed, even if its goals are noble and reactions to shocking dystopias. There are few examples where technology has created entirely new problems. Instead, technology is an accelerant for existing problems that are already real and here. Technology contributes scale, visibility, and speed to the impact of these issues. Furthermore, our mobilization amounts at this time to a form of solutionism, a belief that small tweaks to existing practice should lead to better or more ethical outcomes. At a time of profound destabilization, unchallenged practice and limited tools-based engagement may fix immediate problems, but it allows them to re-emerge in new ways down the line. Let's look at the tragedy of innocence. Remember this? Despite fitting the narrative of tech addiction in small children, Toddlers get attached to all sorts of objects and will often throw wild tantrums when these objects are taken away from them. I mean, but beyond this, I'm kind of using this to illustrate a point, which is this concern that we have around screen time in children. And we really worry about tech addiction in children and teenagers having meltdowns and phone addiction. But maybe this is a symptom of familial fracture of time-poor and overworked parents who rely on technology to stimulate and stay in touch with their children. The tragedy of self looks like social media causing addictive vanity.
Lost all of my connections to people, so I just very lonely a lot. It's sad, but that's just how it is. When you got to make a lot of sacrifices, and if you're not already in a relationship before you start streaming or during streaming, then it's really hard to find someone new when you haven't been outside in a very long time. And you get used to just streaming all the time, day in and day out. Not hanging out with friends and stuff because you got to focus everything on streaming. Stream. Got to grind to get up there.
This too is a symptom of economic precarity, in which people with few skills are able to generate income as a sort of middle-class new form of celebrity. That is, people widely known but with very little support and a fraction of the income. It's easy to dismiss the tragedy of truth as the work of bigoted cranks.
She says she so badly wanted to feel like she belonged.
I came to the realization that, instead of accepting that I'm just a generally mediocre person, those groups make you feel like you are excellent. You are it just for existing, for doing absolutely nothing.
You're making it sound like if you're a member of one of these groups, the qualifications are be white and be a loser.
I can't really argue that.
It's much easier to get sucked in if you're lonely, if you don't have a strong sense of self. And I think they got to her at a time in her life when she was just really battered around and didn't really know who she was.
Perhaps this is a symptom of broader social issues, tumbling and intertwining together and emerging in these twisted ways. The tragedy of truth lies in a collection of problems: social isolation, lack of mental health, and real or perceived fear of political processes and authority and institutions. In each of these examples, technology is an accelerant of existing, desperate problems that cannot be solved alone with design ethics. I have one more thought. Let's move into the future from the present. Without a more nuanced understanding of our work, we risk a repeat of the story of facial recognition. The Tesla Cybertruck is the latest in a global competitive effort to build innovative transport. Electric cars, often with autonomous driving technology, are seen as this inevitable reality, and some predict their deployment on public roads across the globe in the next 10 years. In this video, a woman is hit and killed by an Uber autonomous vehicle. This horrific incident is described as a software malfunction, but it also reignited debate about the morality of software. Should a car choose to sacrifice one person over another in an emergency? It's a serious question, and it's a difficult one, with ethical implications on societies. Cars alter entire landscapes, and car infrastructure policies dramatically reshape cities. But autonomous cars are different. For the first time, cars must adapt to their environment through software decision-making. This event and the following ethical debate catapulted the ethics of self-driving cars into the public imagination. This is an extraordinary video of people attempting to escape the 2011 tsunami in Japan by car. To date, there is little available research that examines or explains how a car might behave in such a systemic catastrophe.
Oh, shit. God.
We are on the precipice of a climate disaster still, and yet little public research exists that it describes how a self-driving car could navigate situations in which the environmental data cannot be acted upon autonomously. How does a car trained on millions of hours of orderly traffic data respond to an ever-changing pathway of water and debris, or like this, intense heat and falling burning trees? How do you test for this? In aeroplanes, fly-by-wire technologies disengage in an emergency and rely on the pilot to take over. It is likely that human-driven cars offer the only chance of survival in a crisis like this? As this question looms, it is masked by discussions of software bugs and the machine's moral compass. We are yet to even begin the discussion of the feasibility of this technology in an era of violent ecological collapse. The death of a cyclist is a symptom, a small representation of this looming systemic issue. The self-driving car is born from infrastructure that had a significant impact on the climate, and we should be asking hard questions about this technology. Instead, we argue about the morality of a machine through design ethics, and it may have no place in our world. Beyond YouTube autoplay distracting kids from their homework, and boomer parents sharing conspiracy theories for likes on Facebook, the lived experiences and struggles of people and communities is at odds with how we build and conceive infrastructure. When technology fails, we look for someone to blame, and if our systems cannot cope with our mistakes, then it is hopeless to demand better people. We need better systems, better practice, deeper understanding. Only then will we be able to respond to our fullest potential and avert the darkest timeline. Ethical design, no thanks.